Hey everybody, welcome back to the Seafarer Social Podcast. Today I'm joined by Chris O'Flaherty, who is a senior tech advisor at the Nautical Institute and has an extremely deep background in maritime. And today we're going to be talking about his career background, especially exploring his experience in the Royal Navy, something that's very close to my heart, coming from a family of Royal Navy myself and being based here in Portsmouth, probably the most prominent Royal Navy part of the country. Secondly, we're going to be exploring from Chris's perspective how we can bring more young people into this industry. This is something that maritime has suffered for a while now. There's not enough, perhaps, recognition out there over the options available for young people. And this is something that we're very interested in discussing today. But before we get into anything, how's it going, Chris?
Great, thanks very much. And thanks very much for having me on the podcast, Carl.
Absolutely my pleasure, Chris. So let's start things off from the very beginning, Chris. How many years were you in the Royal Navy?
I served for 37 years, joined up in 1987, and I transitioned out the Royal Navy in September last year, in September 2024.
37 years, wow, okay. So going back to the very start, what was it that initially drew you to considering a career in the Royal Navy? Were you from a family of people in the Royal Navy, or how did it start?
So, family background. My grandfather served in the Royal Navy in the Second World War, and I'll be honest, he saw some stuff that he didn't particularly like. He saw action on many occasions, and as a result, my father was prohibited from joining the Royal Navy. So, my father became a shipwright in the Royal Dockyards. And as a young child, it was brilliant going to work with Dad on a Saturday morning if he had to work overtime, and he would sit me in his office overlooking the dockyard and looking at all these fantastic ships. And I'll be honest, you just become hooked. Family, we built a boat together, my dad and I, when I was 4 years old. I say built together. I used to kind of hold the nails whilst he was actually shipwrighting it and building it. And as I was growing up, a lot of family, a lot of friends in the Royal Navy. I used to go and visit ships periodically for the good look around type things. And it just gets into your blood. It just really infuses you and enthuses you, and eventually, aged 18, I joined the Navy, literally straight from school. Never went to university or anything like that. And the Royal Navy gave me all the qualifications that I needed throughout my career, including now, which is brilliant.
Fantastic to hear that you come from a maritime family and you're inspired by your grandfather and your father. And you spent 37 years in the Royal Navy, which is just fantastic. I mean, typically when I speak to those who serve in the Royal Navy nowadays, they don't make it to 37 years. In fact, many of them, sadly, will join the Royal Navy. Perhaps they'll get a qualification and then they leave and they go in a different direction. And that seems to be a very common pattern, actually, that's happening more and more. What was it specifically for you that drew you to the concept of staying with the Royal Navy for 37 years, climbing through the ranks? And perhaps you could just tell us about that journey, exactly
Certainly.
how you progressed from start to finish.
Certainly. Well, I say joined in January 1987, and one of the things I would say that kept me in is the camaraderie. I am now the treasurer, rather odd little title to have, of the January 1987 Britannia Royal Naval College Reunion Society,
Oh,
which
wow.
means that every few years, most of us that join together on that day, on the 7th of January at 12:30, we all get together. And that camaraderie is incredibly powerful. And within the Royal Navy, within a military service, the fact that I still have extremely close friends from 37, 38 years ago with whom I will regularly meet for a beer or a meal or whatever is, I think, a key part of the answer to your question, because camaraderie is really important. It's the soul of a ship. It's the soul of a fighting unit. It's the soul of any seagoing unit, to be quite frank. In terms of the journey, I've also had amazing job satisfaction. During basic training, they used to make everybody do a practice dive. It was just taken up to the swimming pool. They would strap a diving set on your back, push you in, you do 2 laps of the swimming pool, and then get out. And all it was, the Royal Navy do diving, therefore the theory was all officers should understand the basics of diving. And it was the first time I'd ever been underwater like that, and I was hooked instantly. And the consequence of that was when I left Dartmouth, I qualified as a what's called a ship's diving officer, basic air diving. I spent the next year and a half of my career refining my ability to do basic air diving, and then I became what's known as a clearance diving officer. So that's mixed gas, hard hat diving, all the things you see in the recruiting brochures, basically. And The consequence of that for me was going off to small ships. I was second in command of a warship aged 24. I think that's
Wow.
an incredible thing to say. I'm not the only one, but that's the kind of progression you can rapidly achieve in the Royal Navy. I went off and became a sea trainer for 3 years because of the experience I gained. I then went to big ships. The Navy decided they wanted me to expand my horizons. I got command of a frigate that was in refit and coming out of refit back in 1995, which was an incredible experience. I had 3 more commands after that, one of which was the Fleet Diving Squadron, which runs all of the Royal Navy's underwater bomb disposal globally. And that is an incredible privilege to be leading 200 people, 100 of whom are expert divers. And you are sending them off to the 4 corners of the world, or even the 4 corners of the UK. At my leaving do, when my team dined me out, they pointed out that we'd had a live mission come into the office on average once every 18 hours for 2 years.
Wow.
And when you are sending guys out on live missions that regularly and you're taking the feedback, you're taking the lessons from it, you're implementing those, that is job satisfaction. So to answer your question, job satisfaction is absolutely at the core of what keeps you going. And the Navy kept teaching me new skills. They kept sending me off to different parts of the world. I lived in Bahrain for 2 years working for the United States Navy as a deputy commander of one of their task forces. I worked in embassies. I worked in high commissions around the world. I served on, my first ship was made of wood. My last ship was an aircraft carrier. So you've gone the full spectrum. If I sound enthusiastic, I am. Because to answer your question, that is what keeps you going. If you can give people motivation, if you can deliver to them incredible job satisfaction and camaraderie and teamwork and output which really means something, then you will retain them. I think it was Richard Branson said, train your people well enough they can leave, treat them well enough they don't want to. And I'm very lucky to have been in that situation.
Fantastic. What a story. I mean, it's just phenomenal the amount of responsibilities you've had, from underwater bomb disposal to principal warfare officer, age of 24. I mean, it's just fantastic. And I imagine that some of the experiences you had with your guys and girls have just been, lifelong lessons that you'll take forever.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, so, you have incredible memories, and when you get together with former shipmates, with former work colleagues, you very quickly end up just spinning dits, as we phrase it, just telling the stories, reliving those experiences.
Yeah.
They also make you a better person because as you relive them, you analyze them. And part of that analysis is working out, okay, it was brilliant, I survived, or I did well, or I delivered the mission, whatever it is. But through reliving it, through talking about it, you can also then think, actually, me, I could have done that a bit better. You may not verbalize that. Depends on who you're with. Depends on the level of trust you have with that person. But that makes you incredibly better because as you go forward in your career, as I've done now, transition to a civilian career at the Nautical Institute, you can learn all of those lessons. You could think that's where I could make it better for somebody else. And if you can get job satisfaction, not only for yourself, but job satisfaction through refining processes and through making regulation or making processes or making situations better for other people, which I do now as I sit in the International Maritime Organization helping to design the world's shipping regulations. That's brilliant.
For sure, 100%. I think one of the things I find really interesting when I speak to those who've been in the forces, like I said, I come from a family of Royal Navy, is there's a particular mindset that's picked up, I think, when you're in the Royal Navy, and a lot of people on the outside world will never be able to adapt that mindset because they just simply haven't relived the same experiences and had to rely on others like people in the Royal Navy have. For example, my mother-in-law, she served in the Royal Navy for I think 18 years, and she has a mindset which is very systematic. And sometimes, I'm not from the Royal Navy, we can sometimes find that frustrating because she likes things done in a certain way, and that's the way it has to be done. But the flip side to that is when I speak to the people she works with now, they say stuff like, "This is the kind of person we could trust with our lives. She's the most selfless person ever." And I truly believe that she's an amazing team player. She's hugely good at leadership. I truly believe that these values, trust, selflessness, leadership, I think that these are the kind of this is exactly what the Royal Navy emphasises and develops in people, which I think we're seeing less and less in younger people because we're in such a competitive, fast-paced world now. It's, oh, I want to get it now. I don't want to wait around. I want now, and I want to make more money, and I don't want to be in this company anymore. I'm going to move every 2 years. Whereas the Royal Navy really instills those morals that I think that as a world we're looking for more of.
Well, something the Royal Navy introduced about 15 years ago was what's known as the core values. And the core values are courage, commitment, discipline, respect, integrity, loyalty. There you go, no notes, bang them off. And that, I think, is important because when you examine each of those 6 core values, there's the thread of what you've just described. You can then broaden that out to integrity. That's the honesty side. That's the always being yourself. But then that also applies to selflessness. You've got the loyalty to your shipmates, loyalty to your team, loyalty to your boss and your subordinates. You've got courage, which is really important because actually this is not just warfighting courage. This can be moral courage. It's doing the right thing. And sometimes doing the right thing isn't doing the popular thing. But when those values have literally been tattooed through your soul for 37 years, then that is something that you cannot walk away from. It's something that when I meet my old school friends, as I sometimes do, and you sit there and tell stories about one of them goes off and becomes a lawyer, one is an economist, naval officer, you can see the differences that different professions breed into different individuals. And you mentioned trusting somebody with your life. Of course, anyone in the Royal Navy has done that on a ship. The officer of the watch quite often is up there. There's just 2 or 3 people awake at night when you've got an entire ship's company asleep. As a diver, that's even more so because quite regularly you turn up on a dive site. You will construct one of the diving sets, but that may not be the set that you actually dive. And particularly as you become a senior officer, as I did, I would be invited to a dive site. And the last thing my team wanted was me hanging around for a couple of hours building diving sets with them beforehand. They just wanted to get on with their job. So I would walk onto a dive site, be presented with a diving set that somebody else has made up. I'd strap that on my back and dive to 60 meters in zero visibility on mixed gas. You are placing incredible levels of trust into a young able seaman that I think is something that's really important. Your point about people today, how do you translate that psyche into the modern mariner, the modern seafarer that's going to sea? And I don't think it's that difficult. It's just a simple matter of leadership from the master, from the chief officer, from the company. The company needs to imbue that into all of its ships. And if you can do that, that's how you will get young seafarers to remain enthused and to want to go to sea.
You mentioned one really important word there, and that's leadership. I want to talk a little bit more about that. Can you share some of the key leadership lessons from your time commanding various naval vessels, from minesweepers to aircraft carriers?
Well, there we go. I didn't command all of those, but I've commanded a lot of sailors, including, the Fleet Diving Squadron was probably the best example for me because you are leading sailors doing some quite dangerous things, to be quite realistic. The trick is to know how to delegate, and it's delegate until you're nervous, and then possibly delegate a little bit more. And trust your people. And if you can imbue into your subordinates that knowledge that so long as they make a decision that they honestly believe I would have made in the same circumstances, and I will then support them to the nth degree, and I promised all my sailors I would do that, then that is really important as a matter of leadership because that empowers them. And sailors that are empowered, sailors that know what they're doing, they're professional and they're trusted to do their job, get more job satisfaction, and they achieve the mission far more effectively than people who are either mollycoddled or, I think worse still, just controlled from afar by email and by company diktat. Give people a framework within which to work. And the military term for this is mission command. And it's where quite literally you give somebody a mission, you say, right, tell me when you're finished. What you don't do is tell them how to achieve the mission. What you don't do is tell them too many parameters. Just give them left and right of arc, but empower your people, let them get on with it and let them come back to you when they've done what you want them to do.
Great bit of advice. And I think it's definitely the best way to learn. For sure. One of the things I'm really interested in talking to you about, because you've been in the Navy for 37 years, you probably see a huge transition that the Navy took from, back in the day when the UK was renowned for having one of the strongest, if not the strongest the strongest Royal Navy in the world. And as time's gone on, less and less funding has been available. Unfortunately, we have seen people drop out. I know, again, from coming from a family of people working in the Navy, that the pensions is not as good as what it once was, and some of those benefits that they had before no longer exist. What do you think the future is for the Royal Navy? We constantly see these TV ads about how we can bring young people in, but it's difficult when, we live in a world nowadays where it's required that we earn a certain amount to be able to pay for a house and so on and so forth. And I know that there are still benefits of being in the Royal Navy. I know that they get looked after in terms of housing, but I've even spoke to others who said, well, I can't even get a house. They're all full in terms of the naval houses. So how do we bring young people specifically into the Royal Navy in 2025?
I think the Royal Navy, you've got to remember that the decisions that are being taken by their lordships, by the First, Second Sea Lords and others, you must be very careful never to criticise them. And the reason I say that is something I used to say to junior officers. I used to run junior officer training for the seamanship world. And before sailors went to see the young officers, I used to point out to them that it's great to sit in the wardroom and to criticise their bosses. But then I would challenge them and I'd say, how many times have you ever woken up in the morning and thought, right, today I'm going to make a really awful decision. I'm just going to see how it goes. And of course, they will just look back and say, well, I've never done that. And I said, well, why do you think your bosses have done that? Why do you feel it right to criticise their decisions as if it's an awful or a terrible decision? When you just told me you've never woken up in the morning and thought, I'm just going to make an awful decision and see how it goes, but you think they have. Actually, everybody makes the best decision they can in the circumstances based on their knowledge, their experience, and the factors that have been presented to them. And I think it's important to remember that their lordships, the Admiralty Board, are making incredibly difficult decisions. The Navy is a resource limited organisation, as any government department is, and they are trying to frame their decisions within those resource limits in terms of ship procurement, in terms of pay, in terms of pensions, in terms of medical, travel, whatever you want to call it. And therefore, to start answering the question, could you divert resources in another direction? I'm sure if I was asked to make the decision, I may very well make subtly different decisions because I have different knowledge and experience than those making them today. But the people making those decisions are doing the best that they can within the constraints that are presented to them. In terms of getting people to join the Royal Navy, there's a lot of really good positives out there. The salary is actually pretty good. It's pretty damn competitive compared to like-for-like jobs ashore. Part of that, though, is remembering there is good social connectivity from ships these days, and I'm careful what I'm saying because submarines, that of course doesn't apply, and we've just seen very recently a particularly long submarine deployment with no connectivity whatsoever. You've got an extremely good pension. Genuinely, it is an outstanding pension offer compared to what I think almost any civilian company would offer you. Job satisfaction is really high. In terms of now I'm working within the merchant Navy sphere, I look at one of the big factors which to me is a negative in terms of going to sea is working cargo. And it sounds an odd thing to say. The actual working of cargo is a real positive. It's an amazing feat of seamanship, getting all that stuff on and off of ships. The problem is it's so damn fast. It's incredibly efficient. So the old days of a break bulker pulling alongside in some South African port, working cargo for a week, which means that every evening the junior officers could go ashore and see Rio de Janeiro or Buenos Aires or a Caribbean island. They've gone. You'll pull alongside now. You'll spend 12 to 18 hours discharging a couple of thousand containers and putting a couple of thousand more and you're off again. And the consequence of that for the merchant Navy is that whilst you see the world, you don't step ashore and experience the world. I will contrast that with the Royal Navy, where most visits are 3, 4, 5 days. So yes, you do get to step ashore. You get to not only see the world, you get to experience the world, and you can step ashore. You can go and experience these amazing cultures. My daughter made me add up a few years ago how many countries I visited, and I think it was 67 countries in my career.
Wow.
Which is incredible. And I was paid to do it. I didn't pay a penny for any of that. I literally saw the world. The only continent I've never visited is Antarctica. Apart from that, I've set foot on every continent on this planet. and I've been paid to do so. Again, hopefully my enthusiasm comes across, because there's a great career to be had there. And I think it's just selling all of those things. The Royal Navy have got this mantra at the moment of, born in whatever, made in the Royal Navy. And I think that's a really true thing, because as you go around the world, that makes you an incredibly good person from all those experiences you can translate into a later career whenever you want that career to start.
What is the perfect avatar? Let's just take a young person. What are the sort of key traits you would say in someone? Say there's a young person listening to this right now who doesn't know what they want to do with their life. What's the perfect avatar for someone who would excel in the Royal Navy?
I think someone who is enthusiastic, they can accept discipline. And when I say discipline, I'm talking, be part of a team. Tidy up in the morning, make your bed. When you've finished eating, don't leave it on the table. Make sure you're the person that actually goes and washes it up. And if somebody else has forgotten to wash up or has been too busy to wash up, you're the person that actually picks their plate up as well. That selflessness. Someone who's wants camaraderie, they want social friendship, they want to be part of a team. Most people want to be part of a team. Look at football matches. Actually, most of us aren't good enough to actually go and play for Plymouth Argyle, the greatest team in the world, but many people want to be part of the supporter base. They want to be part of that 20,000 that stand on the terraces and cheer, because actually that is a team. You are a team of supporters. Translate that to the Royal Navy. You can be part of a ship's company. You can be part of the engineering department. You can be part of the seamanship department. Take it to the diving world. You can be part of a 4-man diving team that's going off and doing incredible things around the world, diving to 60 meters, blowing stuff up. It's a really enthusiastic thing. And if you've got somebody who wants to be part of a team and they're happy to make friends, they're happy to, they're happy with change as well. And I think that's quite important in the world as we live it. You don't want somebody who's fixated on absolute regimented diary following. They've got to be able to accept fairly rapid, no, actually, we're not going to do that. We're going to go and do something else today, and you're going to enjoy it.
Yeah, great point. I think you're totally right. There's numerous times in my life when I was younger where I think it's difficult for young people nowadays, Chris, because there's so much choice out there that can almost be overwhelming. Like you don't know what direction to go in. I think sometimes because of the likes of social media and stuff like that nowadays, we're sort of driven by perhaps the wrong reasons. What job can I do that makes me £100,000 a year, instead of what job can I do to develop the right characteristics to be able to one day earn £100,000 a year. And I think that's how we should be thinking more of, instead of trying to just go for it. You know what I mean?
Money is an interesting motivator. Now, we need money to live. You mentioned earlier on, you need money to buy a house, you need money to buy a car, whatever it is. But in equal measure, if you think of life in terms of job satisfaction, then how much is that job satisfaction worth? How much is your personal happiness worth? There's a lovely story that resonates with me of a guy who goes every morning and he fishes for 2 hours and he catches just enough fish for his family to eat a nice healthy meal every day. And some businessman comes along and says, well, you're a really good fisherman. Why don't you fish for 4 hours a day and get some extra fish and you can sell it? And then you can build a bigger business and you can get other people to fish for you and you can get even more fish and you can sell more of them. And then you can kind of move to London and you can have a big fishmonger so you can make lots and lots of money. And then they said, well, where does this lead to? And he says, then when you retire, you've got loads and loads of money and you can go and fish for 2 hours a day. And I think it's a really interesting point that do you need to go through all of that loop to end up doing what you were doing in the first place, which is actually what makes you happy? And if you can get our young people these days just to work out what makes them happy rather than the financial side of it, and you can deliver that to them, then it's really important. When I took command of Northumberland, I used to sit down with every sailor when they joined the ship, and I would talk to them and ask them 3 questions. One is, why did you join the Navy? One was, what do you want to achieve in my ship? And the third one was, why haven't you left? And the third question, a lot of people thought was a very odd question to ask, but I thought, if I know why you've joined the Navy, I'll keep it going. If I know what you want to achieve in my ship, then I will help you achieve it. And if I know why you haven't left, again, I can accentuate those positive draw factors. And if you take that into a mindset rather than a question and answer session, then that's something which can drive you through life very positively.
It's a great way of being able to decipher exactly what it is people need and being able to work with them to get to that achievement. Chris, one of the other subjects that I talk about when I speak to mariners is the ability to be able to juggle between being a great parent and a great mariner. You're spending vast amounts of time away. You said earlier on you have a daughter. How many children do you have, Chris?
I got 2 daughters.
2 daughters. How did you juggle spending time away from your family and being a great dad?
I think it's the key one is an amazing wife. Or an amazing spouse. And it's a spouse that can cope when you're away, that can cope when you're out of touch. When I first joined the Navy, you were still on letters. There were 2 factors of morale on a ship. One was food and the other one was mail. And as long as you got a mail drop relatively frequently, then you had a fairly happy ship's company. If the food was good, you had a very happy ship's company. That's since been overtaken by email. The point that comes from mail was when your family write to you, they would write, they would write on the envelope, but in the top left-hand corner opposite the stamp, they would write a number, and you would get the letters and you would make sure you open them in order, because the first letter after you'd sail would say blah blah blah, washing machine broken, and then the next letter you'd open, number 2, would be washing machine fixed, and the next letter you'd open would be car is broken. The next letter would be car is fixed, because your family are just getting on with whatever they need to do whilst you're away, including bringing up the children, including giving your children an amazing life through which they can thrive. And part of that, to be quite frank, it does come back. There is a small element of money there, because happiness can be driven in some part by opportunity which you can purchase certain things. My wife was amazing in bringing the kids up, but then when you come back, part of it is to not impose yourself as the head of the household, because the reality is that if you've been away for months on end, your wife has been dealing with a bank account. Don't step in there. Your wife has been dealing with a plumber. Don't step in there. Your wife has been dealing with a builder. Don't step in there until you're asked to, because sometimes when you come back off deployment, you want to just be the big I am again. That just doesn't work. It just upsets the feng shui of the household. But then do be a great father. Make sure that when you are around, you turn up to the school concert. Make sure that you take your kids to play sport. Make sure that you have some amazing holidays where you turn your phone off, you turn off your email, and you become a parent again. And that is the work-life balance. And if you have a family that is accepting of that, I think that is a really lovely way forward.
What a beautiful, beautiful recitement. Every time I've ever asked that question, I've had lots of responses, but that was one of the most beautiful, most eloquent answers I've ever heard. And it sounds like you have an absolutely fantastic wife. And I agree, actually. I totally agree. I don't spend long durations away from home, but I know that whenever I do have to leave, I'm leaving my daughter Florence in the hands of a fantastic woman. And I think it's a really interesting point, discussing the concept of balancing both. Another thing that I'll throw your way, and I wonder if it's the same in the Royal Navy, is when I speak to the guys in the Merchant Navy, they say, well, one of the beauties about being in the Merchant Navy is that, yes, when you're away and you're working hard, but when you come home, you can switch off. And that's the beauty of being able to completely and utterly, you don't have to worry about emails or being peppered by the concept of having to run into the office randomly or jumping on a call. You can switch off and you can just focus on being extremely present with your kids. Is that the same with the Royal Navy as well?
Tends not as much, because when you're on a ship and you go on leave, then you're still a part of that ship's company. And certainly, if you're the second in command, or if you're the commanding officer, even if you're the operations officer, then you'll still get phone calls on leave, and you just have to accept those. But again, it comes back to what I said earlier on about delegation, and the trick there is to delegate and keep delegating until you're nervous, and then delegate just a little bit more, because you've always got people in the office that can deal with things, and that comes down to trust. And part of trust is, how have you trained your compatriots? How have you trained your junior officers to make sure that they know exactly what they can deliver on your behalf, and exactly the point where they do need to actually phone you for a decision? And I think that's the work-life balance in the Royal Navy. the concept of 4 months on, 2 months off, and the 2 months off, you're not even attached to the ship, doesn't really exist. Although with some of the cycles are now operating on the Minehunter fleets that deploy out to the Gulf and the frigate that's out in the Gulf with 3-watch manning and the like, that can be achieved. And so it depends exactly which job you're in at the time, but you can turn off in that case. And that's, again, a really important part of just recovering your mental health and making sure you stay sane, making sure that you can be a family father and not overly distracted.
As I mentioned earlier on, my mother-in-law was in the Navy, and she was an officer, and she transitioned, and now she works in Navy Fit, Navy Sport, and she says to me, it speaks about how when Charlotte, my partner, was young, she was able to take Charlotte skiing once a year. She trained with the Navy guys. Usually, it costs thousands and thousands of pounds to learn how to ski. She'd get it for free. So Charlotte was learning how to ski at a young age for free. They'd regularly go to places like Hawaii and fantastic holidays. So by the time Charlotte was 16, she'd visited some of the most amazing places in comparison to the rest of the people in her class who'd probably only been to Spain. So I think from that perspective as well, if you're part of the Royal Navy, you actually have access to be able to take your family to some of the most amazing places in the world.
Seize the opportunities. Life is about opportunities. Sometimes those opportunities are luck that just come your way. Sometimes you create them, and in many cases you can create them. The trick is to spot those opportunities and to exploit them and to seize them. It might be your example there was that the exact phrase would be the Royal Navy Ski Championships, which for people and families that like skiing are amazing opportunities, generally sponsored.
Yeah.
There's a lot of money that goes in behind it. It's been going for a long time. I've got friends that do that and teach on it. And it's an amazing experience. I happen to be a yachtsman, and I have got some amazing qualifications through the Royal Navy. But more importantly, I enjoy teaching yachting. So I would volunteer to take joint service yachts out and to take young sailors and soldiers and aviators and just impart some of my knowledge. And it's an amazing bit of job satisfaction when you can go out for a week and you can take a young soldier who's probably never been on a boat in his life, and then you can bring them back to Gosport and you say to him or her, okay, I'm just going to sit here quietly and I want you to berth the yacht and put it to bed. And they can do it. And in terms of the opportunity, there's two sides to that. One is just all those little opportunities you got, be it sport, be it skiing, be it debating, be it travel. The other one is actually how that grows people. I know sometimes the Armed Forces budget comes in for criticism. For example, why do they own a small fleet of yachts? Well, the answer is that it's cheaper than sending a soldier out on exercise with live ammunition and ration packs. But what you get out of it, properly done, is a better person who's a better team member, who's got transferable skills to their full-time day job, and you've done it quite often for less money than it would otherwise cost to deliver that training. In terms of society, you're generating a better person. So when that young soldier transitions out of the army or the Air Force and becomes a civilian and becomes a productive member of society, they've got leadership, they've got stamina, they've got grit and determination, they've got a risk appetite where they can then generate wealth for our country.
Fantastically well said. I think that you're totally right, seizing every opportunity, because frankly the Royal Navy opens up a catalogue of opportunities that other career paths would not. And I think for many young people, it's not for everybody, but for the right person, it's definitely an opportunity, right? And I think that's what it means by that advert that comes out. I was born in whatever, but I was made in the Royal Navy. And I think It's the same when we speak about the Merchant Navy as well. This is not a career for everyone, but for the right avatar, this is the perfect career.
And even if it's not the right career for you lifelong, it can set you up beautifully. A lot of young cadets I talk to now, their intention is to get their Class 1 and then transition ashore. But with a Class 1, they can get some incredible jobs, be it in the city, be it working with some of the big companies, be it on some of the rivers and ports around the country. They've got some really good lifelong skills. By transitioning to those different roles, they can get further job satisfaction through variety, but also they've always got their Class 1 in their pocket. So if ever they do want to go back to sea, they can do exactly that. They can just go and apply to the MCA, refresh their certifications, and disappear back off onto the high seas for a couple of months or years, depending on what floats your boat.
Yeah, great point. Chris, you've now retired from the Royal Navy, officially come ashore.
Mm.
And without being presumptuous, one would assume that after 37 years working in the Royal Navy, you don't need to actually work. You could just, enjoy the rest of your life playing golf or whatever. But you've decided to take on these advisory roles. With the Nautical Institute, you do some work, you do some engagement with the IMO as well. Tell us a little bit more about what was it that motivated you specifically to transition into these advisory positions?
So I came to the end of an amazing military career. I want to give something back, and I've been a member of the Nautical Institute since 2013, so that's 12 years. I'm an associate fellow, and I saw an opportunity that they were advertising for a senior technical advisor with the lead role for the Institute at the International Maritime Organization. For those that aren't aware, the International Maritime Organization, known as the IMO, it is the global shipping regulator, and they basically run all of the big regulations and the guidelines, principally for merchant shipping worldwide, but you actually find the vast majority of navies worldwide will comply not as a matter of law, but as a matter of policy. So, for example, you will find that safety of life at sea, the SOLAS Convention, is mandatory, of course, for merchant shipping. But, for example, the Royal Navy will comply as a matter of policy. You've got the maritime pollution regulations, you've got the tonnage convention, you've got the load line convention. I can go through, there's 51 of them. And so my opportunity now is to represent on behalf of all seafarers their views into the heart of IMO decision making. Why that's important is because the IMO itself is a blend of some seafarers. There's a lot of diplomats there because it is a subsidiary body. It's a technical body of the United Nations. So some countries see it as a diplomatic post. There are maritime lawyers. There are people who have come through, let's use the phrase, the shore trades of the merchant marine service with very little seagoing experience. And so what I can bring to that discussion is 37 years of maritime experience, of which about 20 was actually on ships. So taking that to the heart of decision making for the IMO is really important, because you can use the phrase, sometimes it's the reality check of the theory looks good, but this is what sailors are actually going to do with that regulation or a piece of information.
Yeah, sure. And with these insights that you're gathering now from the Nautical Institute and the IMO, etc., just so we can wrap things up now, I guess with what you're seeing being discussed for the future of maritime, can you give us some insight as to why young people should be excited to join this industry, especially within the next 5 to 10 years? What's changing that you should really want to be a part of if you're considering even slightly joining the maritime industry?
I think the pace of change is incredible at the moment. The IMO is working on what's called the MAS code, the Maritime Autonomous Surface Ships Code. Initially, it's going to be voluntary, and then shortly, it will, in early 2030, it will transform itself into a mandatory code. So what for young seafarers? They are going to be at the absolute cutting edge of technology as you move from, quite literally, some ships are still out there on steam turbines, whereas you're now going to have ships with incredible levels of technology which need human supervision. That human supervision could be at sea, or that human supervision could be in a remote operation center. And initially, the people in those remote operation centers are going to need seagoing experience in order to interpret that digital information that is being presented to them. So you've got a lovely work-life balance there. You can do your sea time to get that experience. You can then operate in a ROC, as it's called, remote operation center, bit of shore time, see the family, however you want to phrase it. Great opportunity to balance seeing the world, traveling. Huge responsibility as a young officer of the watch. You can, 22 years old, you can be the officer of the watch of a merchant ship at sea. 100,000 tons. That's incredible. Most people couldn't even dream. They can't even conceive of that until they go through it. So you get that responsibility. The technology moving beyond that is really incredible. We're dealing with upgrades at the moment to, you've got AIS, the automatic identification system. There's new systems coming online, VDES, the voyage data exchange system. You've got LRIT, long range information system and tracking, which is coming through, all blending lots more data together. So I think for a young person that's been brought up in a data centric world, going to sea now is not that old mechanical heavy cranes, blocks and tackle. It's still there and you have to be familiar with it, but you can blend that with the exciting modern technology, which I think for a lot of younger people floats their boat.
Yeah, I agree. I think technology is definitely one of the most appealing factors for the future because it's so exciting and the responsibility is so high, and that to be involved with such innovation and such responsibility it really gives a sense of purpose to young people, and I think it's a great career for all. And very well said, Chris. Thank you so much for giving me your time today.
Delighted.
You know, I've spoke to a fair few guests on this, and every so often you really feel like you're in the presence of someone special, and I've definitely felt that today, Chris.
Thank you very
I
much.
think it's a huge honour to be able to speak to somebody of such depth and experience in such a fantastic career that you've had, and the knowledge you've had is the knowledge you have is very evident. And I think people like yourselves will play a big responsibility in really transcending that message to young people and making sure that we can continue to create an appealing industry for the next generation. I hope we can meet each other in person eventually, Chris. I'm a consultant at the IMO, so it'd be great to if next time you're there, some point to grab a cup of coffee and
Delighted. Please let me know
up.
when you're coming up, Cole.
Yeah, likewise, Chris. But thank you so much, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your week.
Thanks very much indeed.
See you, Chris.
Thanks. Bye.